Hello and welcome. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. It's good to have you again with us. Now, you're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. We're calling it, as always, hashtag tracking COVID-19. Remember, DD India is your one-stop destination for all information related to COVID-19. And it goes without saying that we at DD India are taking particular care to give you, the viewer, accurate, authentic and authoritative information so that you don't fall prey to rumors or fake news. Now, wherever in the world you might be, it is in your interest to follow protocols, advisories and guidelines issued by the authorities concerned. Now, it's day 52 of the lockdown. We have 2 more days to go in lockdown 3.0. Some restrictions have been eased, but we are not out of the woods. Things could quickly take a turn for the worse. So please practice social distancing, wear a mask, and most importantly, keep washing your hands with soap. All right, then let's get started. First up, the headlines. The third tranche of Atmanirbhar Bharat package worth 1,65,000 crore rupees focuses on agriculture, dairy and fisheries. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announces agriculture marketing reforms. In another booster dose, 1 lakh crore rupees set aside as Agriculture Infrastructure Fund, a 10,000 crore rupees scheme for formalization of micro-food enterprises will benefit about 2 lakh enterprises. ₹20,000 crore for fisher folk under the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. It will provide employment to about 55 lakh people and enhance exports to 1 lakh crore rupees. ₹15,000 crore for Animal Husbandry Infrastructure Development Fund, 4,000 crore rupees for promotion of herbal cultivation in 10 lakh hectares. And 500 crore rupees for beekeeping to benefit 2 lakh people. Another 500 crore rupees for strengthening agriculture supply chain. Now, in the third tranche of the package announced by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman this afternoon, the focus was clearly on agriculture sector.
We provide 1 lakh crore for aggregators, FPOs, primary agriculture cooperative societies, farmer producer organizations which I mentioned, FPOs, all for strengthening the farm gate infrastructure. Farm gate infrastructure are cold chains, post-harvest management infrastructure, storage centers, yards from where they have to do it. So this fund for 1 lakh crore is being created. Here private entrepreneurs, agricultural entrepreneurs, startups, all of whom are now looking at facilitating by procuring from the farmers and reaching out with value addition to the global markets, don't have the infrastructure. So this fund for 1 lakh crore will immediately address that issue, and that fund will be created at the earliest.
A facilitative legal framework will be created to enable farmers for engaging with processors, aggregators, large retailers and exporters in a fair and transparent manner.
To enable farmers for engaging with processors, food processors for instance, aggregators, large retailers and exporters, so that they will be able to fix their own fair price, be sure that he can certainly export, and also in the process benefit from better technology, better seeds, better assistance from the person who's going to buy it from him. So we would want to have an assurance in produce, in price, and in quantity given to a farmer each time before he goes to sow his seeds. Rabi or Kharif, he should have well in advance an assurance of how much he would get for his crop, what is going to get sold, and what standard is he expected to produce. A legal framework is what we'll work at.
And a central law will be formulated to provide adequate choices to farmers to sell their produce at an attractive price. It will also facilitate a barrier-free interstate trade and framework for e-trading of agricultural produce.
Interstate trade at the moment is restricted. It should be barrier-free. We also want to make sure there is a framework for him to have his produce e-traded. He should be able to engage in e-trading of his produce. So a certain amount, at the moment you know that he sells his produce only to licensees, holders of license, and this restriction has been one of the reasons why he is not able to find a fair price. Why should only farmers be restricted in selling his produce to only some licensees and not be open to sell it to whoever he wants to sell? So we want to give farmers the choice so that he'll be able to sell his products at an attractive price, have no barriers in interstate movement, and make sure that he is able to e-trade.
Now, agriculture marketing reforms was also flagged by the minister.
Interstate trade at the moment is restricted. It should be barrier-free. We also want to make sure there is a framework for him to have his produce e-traded. He should be able to engage in e-trading of his produce. So a certain amount, at the moment you know that he sells his produce only to licensees, holders of license, and this restriction has been one of the reasons why he is not able to find a fair price. Why should only farmers be restricted in selling his produce to only some licensees and not be open to sell it to whoever he wants to sell? So we want to give farmers the choice so that he'll be able to sell his products at an attractive price, have no barriers in interstate movement, and make sure that he is able to e-trade.
Also launched was a national animal disease control program for foot and mouth disease and brucellosis with a total outlay of 13,343 crore rupees.
In order that we ensure 100% vaccination of all cattle, all buffalo, all sheep, all goat and pig population, nearly 53 crore animals. India is one of the largest livestock bearing country, and therefore for a country of that size with one of the largest stock of animal with us, FMD has to be eradicated. Therefore, till date, beginning January, in spite of the lockdown difficulties, 1.5 crore cows and buffaloes have been tagged and they have been vaccinated. So traceability can be established.
All right, moving on. Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan chaired a meeting of group of ministers to discuss the way forward on the COVID-19 situation. The Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat, was among those present. Meanwhile, Railway Minister Piyush Goyal has tweeted under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Indian Railways has operated 1,000 Shramik special trains to ferry stranded migrants home. 75% of all Shramik special trains are for Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Right, moving on, BJP spokesperson Sambit Patra in a press meeting via video conference pointed that the opposition-led states are not allowing special Shramik trains to run efficiently. Listen in.
आज सबसे अधिक अगर श्रमिक कहीं परेशान है तो वो वेस्ट बंगाल में है, वो झारखंड के हैं, वो छत्तीसगढ़ के और वो राजस्थान के। ये जो श्रमिक इन राज्यों से आते हैं वो सर्वाधिक परेशान हैं। किसी भी श्रमिक एक्सप्रेस ट्रेन को चलाने के लिए 2 जगह से परमिशन लेने पड़ती है। एक जो ओरिजिनेटिंग राज्य होता है और जिस राज्य को ये ट्रेन जाना है, ओरिजिनेटिंग स्टेट्स तो परमिशन दे रहे हैं, किंतु रिसीव करने वाले स्टेट्स, बहुत ऐसे स्टेट्स हैं जिनका मैं उदाहरण दूंगा, अभी संख्या के साथ दूंगा, वो परमिशन नहीं दे रहे हैं और वो राजनीति भी कर रहे हैं।
Attacking the Mamata Banerjee government, Sambit Patra said that the West Bengal government only ran special trains to evacuate people from Ajmer Sharif. Patra questioned that why didn't the Bengal government run special trains from other places?
टीएमसी है वो इसमें भी एक कम्युनल एंगल देख रही है श्रमिकों को लाने में। अजमेर दरगाह से ट्रेन करके वहां से श्रमिकों को ले आती है। जो बंगाल के लोग अजमेर दरगाह में फंसे थे, वहां से तत्कालीन परमिशन देके ट्रेन करके अजमेर दरगाह से लोगों को ले आती है। किंतु बाकी जो बंगाल के लोग अन्य जगहों में फंसे हुए हैं, वहां से एक भी ट्रेन नहीं चलती है।
All right, let's now take a look at some international news. Here's a graphical representation of the COVID-19 outbreak in different countries. Take a look. Now, to mark Teachers' Day in South Korea, the government has pledged to support schools across the nation as students continue to study online amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Bruce Harrison reports from Seoul.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in said his government is going to work to see that all schools are able to offer online learning in this country. And that's very important right now amid this pandemic. South Korea is pursuing online education for its public schools as opposed to classroom education because there's fears of the virus spreading among the students. South Korea has some of the fastest internet speeds in the world. It's well known as a tech-savvy, highly wired country. But when the government announced it was going online as opposed to reopening schools, there were some concerns. Not every student has the same access to internet or tablets or different computers to access these online programs. So that's one of the government's goals, to make sure those concerns are eradicated and that every student has equal access. They also want to make sure that schools that don't have the proper infrastructure and support for teachers to offer these classes can do the same as well. Classes have once again been delayed from reopening here because of a recent infection cluster in Seoul. Roughly 130 to 40 cases now linked to an outbreak at several nightclubs in a popular nightlife district in the capital. The classes were supposed to begin this week. They've pushed it back to next week for third and final year high school students, and then from June, other primary and secondary students will resume classes. Seoul and South Korea have become known around the world for their success in tackling the virus, but we're seeing these infection clusters The government had anticipated small outbreaks like this and believes with its trace, test, and isolate systems, it can bring them under control and it can manage the battle against COVID-19 this way until there is a vaccine.
Right, moving on, Moscow has begun a new mass antibody testing program. Now, tens of thousands of people a week will be invited to have the blood test to try to determine how many of the city's residents have already had the virus. Lucy Taylor gets us this report.
Moscow's mayor said that about 70,000 people will be chosen at random every few days. To receive the invitation to take these tests, they'll receive it by email or by text message. And he urged people to take up the invitation if they receive it, saying that it was their opportunity to contribute to victory over the coronavirus. It will be a blood test, testing for IgG or IgM antibodies in the blood, trying to determine how many people have already had the coronavirus, whether they have any level of immunity, and then with that information, how and when the authorities might be able to ease lockdown in this city. Russia's President Vladimir Putin this week ended a national non-working period which had been in place since the end of March, designed to stop people going out and about and spreading the virus. But he gave autonomy to different regional leaders to have stricter or looser restrictions in different parts of the country, depending on the scale of the outbreak in the individual regions. So here in Moscow, lockdown continues until at least the end of May. And Moscow's mayor has previously said he believes that the number of cases could be as many as 3 times higher than the official figures here show.
And continuing with our Ground Zero segment, in which we get you ground reports from our correspondents, Europeans are hoping for a summer holiday as the European Union announces its plans to rescue the bloc's embattled tourism industry. The EU announced a set of guidelines to allow transport to resume, with borders currently restricted across Europe. Lucy Ho reports from Brussels.
These plans give some hope that some regional travel might be possible as we approach the busy summer months in Europe. The plans would be a 2-step gradual and phased approach, which would initially allow some travel between EU member states with similar epidemiological levels of COVID-19. Phase 2 would see freedom of movement restored in the 26 member state Schengen zone, but experts are warning that that phase is months away, not weeks. The upcoming peak tourist season in Europe is worth more than $160 billion, with the EU desperate to revive its lucrative tourism industry. While life is feeling like normal or close to it in some parts of the bloc, Belgium has now voted to move into phase 2 of its coronavirus response from next week, allowing some small markets and hairdressers to reopen. Children will be going back to school. France and Spain, we will see life creeping back to normal again, with terraces in Spain of cafes and bars now allowed to operate in-house at 50% capacity. Lucy Hoff, Dordashen News, Brussels.
In other news, Singapore unveiled a 4-legged canine-like robot to remind parkgoers to maintain social distancing. The robot, named Spot, could be seen patrolling Bishan Ang Mokyo Park on Friday afternoon as part of a 2-week trial run held by the National Parks Board and the Smart Nation and Digital Government Group, according to an official press release from National Parks. Spot, which was developed by Boston Dynamics, is being deployed to reduce the manpower required for park patrols and minimize contact among staff.
Thank you.
Let's keep Singapore healthy.
All right, now take a look at what else is making news around the world. Now, Friday was the first day after Japan lifted the state of emergency. People returned to a shopping mall in Okayama in western Japan. Restrictions were lifted in 38 other provinces. People wandered freely in the mall with hand sanitizers and social distancing measures still in place. Moscow streets are returning to near normal. People left their homes this morning in spite of the extension of the lockdown till 31st May. Russia has the second highest number of confirmed cases in the world after the United States, something it attributes to a massive testing program which it says has seen almost 6 million tests conducted. People in the Chinese city of Wuhan queued up in the day to undergo tests for the virus. The city reported a cluster of infections over the weekend, the first since a virtual lockdown on the city was lifted on 8th April, raising fears of a second wave. Makeshift testing stations could be seen across the city today, outside of residential compounds, restaurants and hospitals, as medical staff work to gather swab samples from residents. The number of COVID-19 cases in the United States has crossed 14.17 lakh. The death toll hit nearly 86,000. The US is now the country with the most confirmed and death cases of COVID-19 in the world. Swimmers plunged into Bronte Pool in Sydney's eastern suburbs in the day, splashing out laps in the salt water as public swimming pools reopened with a maximum of 10 people allowed in the water. Restaurants, cafes and bars in Australia's most populous state, New South Wales, reopened after a 2-month shutdown. Private households in New South Wales will be able to have 5 guests and public gatherings are limited to just 10 people. Taiwan's health minister rejected Beijing's condition that it accept itself as a part of China for it to be able to take part in a World Health Organization meeting. Now, Taiwan is not a member of the WHO. It has lobbied to take part as an observer in next week's World Health Assembly, drawing strong objections from Beijing, which considers Taiwan to be one of its own provinces. Belgium's primary and secondary schools reopened with smaller classes of final year pupils under strict social distancing rules. Belgium, with a population of 11.5 million, is among the European nations worst hit by COVID-19. However, the rate of new cases, hospital admissions and deaths have fallen steadily from early April peaks, and the government's team of health experts deem the trend encouraging. Singapore's manpower minister toured 2 major dormitories where thousands of workers are under quarantine. The vast majority of the newly infected people are migrant workers living in dormitories. Vatican workers sanitize every inch of the interiors of the stunning St. Peter's Basilica as part of measures to contain the spread of coronavirus. Technically, St. Peter's has remained open during the Italian lockdown, which began in early March, although only for private prayer, and few people have entered because of increased security. Public masses will resume in churches in Italy on 18th May under strict conditions outlined in a protocol signed last week by Italy's Bishops' Conference and the government. Tokyo Olympics organizers say they are not privy to how the International Olympic Committee plans on spending the money they have set aside to cover the costs of the rearranged games. Talks are still underway as to how much the games postponement would additionally cost Japanese stakeholders. The IOC and the Japanese government jointly took the decision in March to postpone the Olympics due to the coronavirus outbreak, the first time in history that the games have been delayed. And that's a wrap on this special broadcast, but news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. I want to leave you with a video on guidelines for home isolation. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.